In the face of Jesus being here in the flesh, the malevolence of the human cultural system simply does not know how to not overplay its hand. The first time around, the malevolence of the human cultural system simply went straight ahead and publicly tortured me to death. And this overplaying of its own hand was so drastically overblown, it completely revealed the hand it was playing for all to see, which was not at all what it had intended. You see, the malevolence of the human cultural system back then believed its own best strategy was to be simple, bold, and brazen. It believed back then that its own best strategic choice was to make it as clear as day to all concerned that if you do not do, say, and believe as we tell you to do, say, and believe, then we will torture you to death in public. After we have done this, you will be gone, and those who remain will be in no doubt that they must do, say, and believe as we tell them they must do, say, and believe. This strategy was the simple, bold, and brazen strategy of the malevolent bully and tyrant that was confident in both its own strength and the comparative weakness of everybody else concerned. And so, it was not until after the malevolence of the human cultural system had boldly and brazenly gone ahead and executed its strategy by torturing and executing me in public that it discovered it had completely and utterly overplayed its own hand to the point where it had openly shown the hand it was playing to the whole world. In the days and years that followed the executing of its strategy, the malevolence of the human cultural system found itself surrounded by a world of people who were now looking at it with clear eyes. And to its own surprise, the malevolence of the human cultural system did not like this one bit. It was exactly what the malevolence of the human cultural system had planned for and asked for, but it had planned and asked for this in the full expectation that once everybody knew how malevolent it was and how brazenly brutal it was more than prepared to be, they would immediately and automatically submit to it and get on with doing, saying, and believing just what they were told to do, say, and believe. What the malevolence of the human cultural system found was that it did get what it had planned and asked for, that everybody should know the strength and power of its contempt and hatred of them. But that once it did get this, it turned out that it did not want the very thing it had thought it had wanted. There was just something about the whole world seeing it so nakedly that made the malevolence of the human cultural system feel naked and vulnerable. And this was not at all to the liking of the malevolence of the human cultural system. It realized now, in the shining light of retrospect, that it had entirely overplayed its own hand. And now it looked to re-evaluate its own strategy, see what damage limitation could be achieved, and find a way forward that did not repeat the same mistake. The malevolence of the human cultural system realized now that it had never wanted to be feared and hated. What it wanted was to be feared and loved. And so, in the interests of damage limitation and finding a new way forward that should lead to it being feared and loved rather than feared and hated, it took the following steps. In order to win back the hearts and minds of those it had disenfranchised by torturing me to death in public, the malevolence of the human cultural system incorporated me into its own book of religion. The very book of religion it had specifically tortured me to death publicly for disputing as being at all helpful or true. In this way, the malevolence of the human cultural system could not only present itself as being a thing of power and glory to be feared, obeyed, and worshipped, but a thing that also carried mercy and love within its own heart, a mercy and love purer than any other. The malevolence of the human cultural system no longer felt quite so naked. Now it had covered its worst excesses in this lie, and a good number of people fell back into doing, saying, and believing what they were told to do, say, and believe. All was right in the world once more for the malevolence of the human cultural system, and it was not worried about me returning, because it knew it would not make the same mistake again. Now it had incorporated me into its own book of religion. It saw itself as having full control over how everybody should think of me and what expectations they should have of me on my return. Expectations that no human being could possibly hope to match. This time around, the malevolence of the human cultural system would not make the mistake of torturing me to death in public, only to turn me into a martyr. This time around, it is important that it appears to not even notice I am here at all, because the last thing it wishes to happen is for people to witness it overplaying its hand again in response to the truth I bring. But the malevolence of the human cultural system always overplays its hand. It is within the very nature of the malevolence of the human cultural system that it always overplays its own hand, because the hand that it plays is malevolence that must be played out. And so, when I resurface once more and begin to share the truths of reality once more, this time the malevolence of the human cultural system shows itself to be entirely unconcerned with my presence. Only it doesn't do this at all, because it overplays its hand, as it always overplays its hand. This time, when I resurface and begin to share the truths of reality once again, the malevolence of the human cultural system only pretends to ignore me. Not by paying me no attention, but by actively and blatantly suppressing me and my work, while pretending not to notice me and my work here. And this is how to overplay your hand. If you are going to play the strategy of ignoring and dismissing someone as inconsequential, then you need to commit fully to that strategy. Because the moment you show yourself to be quietly suppressing that which you are claiming to have no awareness of, you are revealing your hand for all to see. You are making yourself naked once again. And what even is it that the malevolence of the human cultural system is suppressing the moment it gets wind of me? It is truths that are so simple and obvious they could be taught to children in a nursery. This is what I did last time I was here, and I got tortured to death for it. And the moment I started doing it here again, me and my work here were immediately suppressed. It is nothing at all to do with raptures and miracles and special effects, and it is everything to do with me sharing truths that are so simple and obvious they could be taught in a nursery. This is my great offence here right now, just as it was my great offence that previous time. And why is it that I should be tortured to death then and suppressed now for teaching the most simplest and obvious things that a child could understand? It is because the very simplest and most obvious truths that a child can understand comprehensively and definitively break all human culture. All of human culture back then and all of human culture today. And the malevolence of the human cultural system fears this. Fears being made naked in its own eyes. And it will do all it can to prevent this from happening. But it always happens. It happens every time. The malevolence of the human child always becomes revealed to itself. It is only ever a matter of time. Go to my website, candigram.co.uk, while you are still able to, for the truths that are so simple and obvious that even a child can understand them. Do not go there looking for raptures and miracles. Do not go there in the hope of finding me to be possessed of superhero powers. Back then I was a simple man who told simple truths, and here today I am that same simple man who presents the simplest and most obvious of truths that a child can understand, and which break all human culture, and the malevolence with which it asserts itself. Go there to find a simple man who presents these truths as a humble home hobbyist. That is all I am. That is all I ever was. And it is good that this is what I am. Adjust your expectations before you even go there. Go there looking for truths that are humble but real, rather than glorious and spectacular but entirely false. This is the true revelation that we have all been waiting for. Try not to fear the breaking of your cultural beliefs, whichever culture you identify with. The heaven on earth we have been promised lies outside of those expectations. It far surpasses those expectations, even as it is those very expectations that keep us away from it. Go in search of a simple man, a humble man, a human man. This is what you need to want to find before you even go looking. Do you think you can do that? I know you can.